Ever wonder how your genes influence your health? Welcome to Beyond the Sequence, where we explore the fascinating world of DNA and its connection to your well-being. While each person's DNA is unique, many genetic patterns are surprisingly common. Join Amanda Archibald and Sarah Amadon as they delve into these patterns, revealing the deep insights they can provide into your health.
Hey there, welcome back to Beyond the Sequence. This is Sarah Amadon and Amanda Archibald, your hosts, and we're getting into an episode today talking about histamine. And Amanda, I don't know about you, but I have seen so many histamine clients recently, and honestly, we're seeing more and more of it. Mast cell activation is kind of rolled into that. What else are you seeing connection-wise with histamine these days?
For me, it's either overt, it's not the central part of a case, but it's kind of lurking in the background. And when we start to put together some patterns from other genes and symptoms, it's quite prominent. But I think we should unpack that because there's a whole big world of histamine that is almost like at the same level as MTHFR. Everyone has it, right? And we probably want to unpack that a little bit more, but why don't you talk about what you have seen, what you're seeing in your, quote, they are patients, clients. You know, how's it showing up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the histamine piece is really exacerbated by stress in our current culture and our current political climate, you name it. Lack of breaks, lack of vacation time, pay isn't increasing with inflation, so many things that are really adding weight to individuals as a whole. But what is connecting for me is I'm hearing, I've got allergies or I've got migraines, but we're connecting that to things like endometriosis or gout. And I literally had a migraine patient this week, a potential endometriosis patient this week, a uric acid and prediabetes patient this week. Stress exacerbates all of that. So the methylation bucket kind of dumps into that histamine bucket, and we see that expressing very, very often. What about you? Are you seeing that too?
I'm seeing it in different ways because, and we always talk about this, we have an overlap in our client population, but we also are very, very different ends of the spectrum. So for me, because many of my clients are midlife, so as we said, my midlife and beyond, or parents of young children, and where they're trying to, get, like you, get any insight on how their child is built. So I see those populations. So with my midlifers, women and men, but more women, it's showing up with multi-system issues, so multiple complaints that seem to be unrelated. Pain is a part of it. It can be headaches, dizziness, unrelenting pain, failure to recover from surgery, which could be a year old. Weight loss resistance permeates it all. And sometimes when I'm looking at their histamine-associated genes, there's nothing there. We'll talk about those HNMT and DAO, or there's just one that's, quote, lit up. But it's taking that information, like you said. There's a methylation component, and then just the whole oxidative stress picture. So they're all related, right? There's a throughput from all of it. But I would say for my clients, the histamine piece is either absolutely front and center, like they are the hay fever. It's a classic, sinus, headache, hay fever, flora, fauna people, or it's absolutely subtle and it has nothing to do with food. That's what I'm seeing. It is, they can eat leftovers and fermented foods all day, every day, and they don't get that histamine kick from that. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I have one example of a client I had. A gal had just had her 8th baby. So successful pregnancies, no real issues, but all of a sudden she started having hives every day. And so this was the sister of a friend of mine. And so she got sent to me and was like, hey, can you help her with this situation? And last episode, we talked about choline. So we discussed the PEMT SNP and come to find out that was what was going on. And so how do we deal with histamine? We've got it coming in all the time. That could be a pathogen, an allergen. We've got a leaky gut or intestinal permeability where food proteins are leaking through the gut wall into the bloodstream and causing a histamine response because the body is so smart. It's like, what are you doing here? We don't want we don't want these food proteins in our bloodstream, and so we treat it like, an autoimmune condition. And so now we've got food sensitivities out the wazoo that aren't really like an actual allergy, but it's kind of like, well, if we can repair the tight junctions in the gut, we largely can reduce those reactions to foods. And so, but this particular gal with her PEMT SNP, we added a little extra choline in addition to what she was already doing, and poof.
So why do you think the choline, what was it modulating, you think? What was this? I mean, I've got a thought at the immune level. But
I like to explain it to people with histamine, like what are the ingredients that you need to degrade excess histamine? So people are having to take Claritin every day or Benadryl just to function, or they've got a migraine and ibuprofen is getting involved. But if we look at our genes, as you mentioned, we've got HNMT, our intracellular, we've got our DAO, our extracellular, and it's really important to know which one we're dealing with. Otherwise, we might be treating that with a DHIST or a DAO enzyme that may or may not actually be helping a patient to relieve some of that inflammation, some of that histamine. So, but on the HNMT side, methylation plugs into that with our methyl donors, our S-adenosylmethionine or CME. And so that is where the connection, where if you don't have enough of those methyl donors to help degrade that histamine, that we're going to be stuck on repeat.
So you were using choline or phosphatidylcholine as the classic methyl donor. That's what was your thinking, was you kind of subtly, and I think it's a safer way, oh my gosh, a much safer way to offer methyl groups than sticking someone with a B complex or even directly with methylfolate. This is like a much softer on-ramp, and you can do it through food and a supplement, right? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. So that, a phosphatidylcholine is great. If we suspect maybe there's a potential dysbiosis going on, acetylcholine or CDP choline is a good option too, because it might not as readily convert to that, what we consider 100%. Toxic TMAO. I see research on it often, but maybe not as much in clinical practice as maybe the research is showing. I'm not sure. I've seen so many poster presentations and research papers on TMAO. And so as a clinician, I feel nervous, to go, well, I don't want to feed, a gut dysbiosis by giving a phosphatidylcholine. But I don't know. Have you noticed, shifts in the gut dysbiosis if you're doing a phosphatidylcholine with maybe?
Yeah, it's not going to be no, because usually you and I, we're working gut and phosphatidylcholine there for different reasons, right? So me, again, with my client population, the phosphatidylcholine, I'm going to use it less as a methyl donor and more for neurological reasons, to support brain fog or just neuron to neuron communication. I'm looking more for the choline, for the acetylcholine piece. And of course, that is directly connected to the vagus nerve, which would induce peristalsis and gut healing anyway, right? Externally, and immune modulation. So but again, we would never be giving phosphatidylcholine just for one reason, right? We'd usually be working on a gut protocol anyway. So kind of takes away from that TMAO piece for me. It's an interesting question. But the other thing, and I didn't look this up before we came to chat, before we started to record here, but I'm pretty sure Dr. Sam Yanek had said the phosphatidylcholine is a molecule that's flipped out like when you're what's the word? Hitchhiking, right? Do people still hitchhike? We do in Europe, like you saw on the side of the road hitchhiking, and it flips out that out like a flag. And I think it's on neutrophils to say, hey, we're ready to be crushed, like pick us up, take us out in the garbage. It's like a flag that the cell is ready, to be destroyed and removed, which I just thought that was just the most interesting piece of physiology. I may have the cell wrong, but it's a marker. So yeah, imagine if you were deficient or inefficient in that, and that's a flag to clear something, then you would have all this, stuff, garbage hanging out in the immune system that itself is detrimental, right? Like damaged cells of any kind are very destructive. They're inflammatory. So,
yeah, absolutely. And then the DAO side, we need enough B12, vitamin C, copper, iron. So those have a relationship with degrading excess histamine down the DAO side. Now, some patients have just HNMT going on, some have just DAO, and some have a blend. And the blends are the major extremes with just super allergenic. The spring is miserable. They've got, migraine headaches and inflammation, maybe hives or rashes and eczema and asthma. So a lot of those pieces show up in clusters, and then you're just trying to help them manage activities of daily living sometimes because maybe they just can't even function day to day.
Yeah, no.
So you and I will go upstream for that and address oxidative stress usually.
We do, but just before we go up there, because it's such a critical piece, when we want to talk about when we were in New York together, I think we talked about this before, but it's worth bringing that case back up because it connects what we think is histamine to oxidative stress, which is usually the issue. But there's this key hormonal piece too that I think that gets missed, and that's what hits a lot of women and men too, but it hits women as they're cycling or as they're going into menopause when our sex hormones get pinged all over the place. It can directly impact. I'm thinking about this with your mother, who's just had her 8th baby. I was thinking about that. What do her hormones look like? Because estrogen and progesterone can be protective, but progesterone particularly that's one that downregulates DAO, right? Deactivates it. No, it's the other way around. Estrogen deactivates it. Progesterone activates it. So it puts it on guard, which is why I guess women feel better, some, when they're pregnant, right? Because you have this higher level of protection against misery, like, well, I had allergies. How come I don't have them while I'm pregnant? So it'll be interesting. She's delivered her 8th child. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And of course,
it was probably 2 years ago. So
2 years ago.
She hasn't come back crying, so I'm assuming she's doing pretty good.
Yeah, but you think like what her hormones are doing, like and trying to get those modulated, and as women change, for whatever reason, from a detoxification perspective, stress perspective, like you said, if you are estrogen dominant, then you will not necessarily, it'll actually make a bad situation even worse because they'll deactivate this one histamine protective or degrading enzyme in the gut. You lose that, and then you have poor intracellular histamine metabolism. We'll talk about HNMT. You can be in a world of hurt. Like, it's like, what just happened to me? That wasn't there before. So,
yeah, and I think I'd had a conversation a few years back with, might have been with Haley Hurd. She and I were talking about the role of the uterus in helping to manage histamine, and maybe that was the estrogen piece that we think maybe, well, if I have a hysterectomy, all my problems will go away. But sometimes when we remove that organ, it was there for a reason, and it was there to help regulate some of that histamine. We take it out, and sometimes it gets even worse. And so
100%, because I see that population too. It's a really, really, really good thought. Mm-hmm. It makes a bad situation worse. Like, you, on the one hand, you may remedy something, but on the other hand, I see many women, it may take them a year to even feel normal after even a partial hysterectomy, but a full hysterectomy. It's a doozy. Metabolic, systemically. All right.
Yeah.
You want to talk about oxidative. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, really, any surgery, I mentioned this before, but any surgery can have an impact on the vagus nerve, which is going to flare flare histamine anyway. It doesn't really matter where the surgery is. The research I did for my master's thesis and my published paper was on that. It was like vagus nerve, has a role with just about everything. But I was kind of like, oh, well, does that only happen when we cut the vagus nerve or it's near the vagus nerve? But, women who have a C-section have a flare as well. And so it's not necessarily even vagus nerve specific, but any kind of surgery, can put the body in that nervous system dysregulation.
Well, it would, because you flip over immediately to the sympathetic because it's trauma. It's like blunt trauma on the body. That's how it's going to perceive it if it's major surgery. That's interesting.
Not to mention, the medications that you get put under and you got to detoxify all of that. So it's just putting your detox system on high alert.
No kidding.
So going back to my the case study that I presented at the Integrative Healthcare Symposium in February, and this was 2025, not that long ago. We polled the audience to talk about, detoxification with an athlete of mine, or should we talk about a mom who was having asthma attacks, and she was like, Sarah, can you please help me get my asthma under control? Not surprisingly, the audience chose the histamine Havoc discussion. And so I was like, oh, you walked right into that one.
We did. Well, we deliberately did it because we knew what they would do, but you never know. And our co-presenter Yale's like, I absolutely thought I was going to see it go and carry out. I knew we were going to see these.
Yes. Yeah. We sent Yale the slides to take a look at them. She's like, oh, I thought for sure it was histamine. And I was like, I know. So yeah, that was a surprise to me. And I've had, 3 or 4 different clients who have histamine-like symptoms. And I think ahead of time, surely I'm going to see, loads of histamine genes, and I see little to none, maybe a heterozygous one here or there. And so I saw her gene report and I was like, oh, it's not histamine. It's not, purely HNMT and purely DAO, but taking her lifestyle factors into account. And then oxidative stress was really high. So we had glutathione S transferase, M1 deletion. And as we've mentioned before, it's in about 50% of the population to have this deletion.
At least.
Mm-hmm. You and I are seeing it 95% of the time with we're biased because our clients who come to us need help with something. Most people aren't just coming in to go, well, just tell me what I need to know and spending the money to explore. That doesn't happen very often, though it's fun when it does because it's so preventative. But yeah, so that was going on, and superoxide dismutase was going on. So we're not quenching, neutralizing free radicals. And so she, high stress, has 5 kids, and finances and marriage and everything that comes along with getting kids to activities, but you want to get your workouts in. And she loved Orange Theory, evening glass of wine, which can exacerbate histamine and detoxification as well. So really just trying to go upstream a little bit more, that we're seeing the oxidative stress dump into the methylation bucket that then dumps into the histamine bucket, and boom, you've got asthma. So this particular female client of mine, we were able to optimize with our sulforaphane and our melon extract that we've talked about in the past with our defense cell. And it's been life-changing for her because she was, using her daily inhaler and her emergency inhaler, which was very much not normal. I know for like a acute need, I might use an NAC for asthma.
Real quick,
quick when you're flaring. Or if it's HNMT, you could consider a CME for an acute need. And I know that's something that helps me if I've got a migraine, which doesn't happen very often. But instead of ibuprofen, I reach for a CME, and I'm like, okay, now we've.
So what is this CME for listeners who have no clue what that is?
Acetaminophen methionine. It can come in a capsule.
SAME. I understood you saying CME. I'm like, SAME of SAME.
Yeah, so you can take it as a tablet itself. There's a couple of brands out there that have it. It's not something I think anyone should be taking regularly, but for people who might have fibromyalgia or mood stuff, liver stuff, it can be support.
Like a rescue.
Mm-hmm.
So what it's doing, so SAMe, we're going to go back and talk about histamine metabolism because I think it's important to understand what's going on. But so histamine, like you said, can be metabolized two ways, sort of in the periphery or in the gut through DAO, diamine oxidase. And like you said, it's very nutrient demanding. Vitamin C, copper, iron, these are all cofactors. I don't know if B6 is in there. I know it is with HNMT. So it's very greedy. So you need the nutrient sufficiency. But the overflow, which happens a lot with our patients with high levels of oxidative stress, is going to place a demand on the intracellular histamine metabolism or enzyme called HNMT, and MT is a methyltransferase. So it's going to be a hog. It has a high demand for that nutrient, and so SAMe is basically that nutrient, if you will. It is the methyl molecule that HNMT can grab to do its work, which is essentially what it's doing. But there's an interesting piece that we have to carry on and talk about with HNMT, with histamine metabolism, which is like pretty interesting aha. But I never thought about that's a really good rescue to get somebody out of that do loop, right? That vicious cycle. It's a really good point. But you're just putting it in and pulling it out just to kind of stabilize things, then address the root cause.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we can do both things at the same time. You know, we can deal with acute things because if you're in a high stress situation, it's going to exacerbate histamine. And that's when it shows up the most for patients is high stress, not sleeping enough, you know, maybe not fueling properly. That could be definitely exacerbated because the more oxygen we use, the more oxidative stress we have. And so you add in a HIIT workout, you know, high intensity interval training for a whole hour, you've used a ton of oxygen, and therefore we've got more superoxide radicals that now we have to neutralize. So if we've got a couple of hiccups and speed bumps in the metabolism of dealing with free radicals, then we might see that histamine bucket overflow.
Now, and you know, I was just thinking, because you talk about that a lot, particularly because you're working with athletes, but then you take the whole idea of working out fasted as well. So you're already in a form of oxidative stress if you're fasting, 12 to 14 hours. And some people, when they're fasted, they can't access their adipose tissue efficiently. It's very stressful on the body to do that. I mean, they can. Everyone can access it, but some people, it's really fluid. For other people, it's really, really difficult. Now you've added an even higher oxidative burden. You think about it, because the body is going to break down protein, or it's going to grab something as a fuel source and not necessarily fat. So I'm just kind of putting all that together.
Your muscle, and that's one of the things, you know, for fitness or workouts, everyone thinks like, well, if I eat less and I work out more, then I will lose weight.
No.
And I'm like, if you work out fasted, where are you getting the energy from? Tell me, like, how are you filling the fuel tank? You are literally stealing from your muscle for that workout you just did.
Which means you end up flabbier, not tighter, because you can't build muscle that you're breaking down, right? That is not my area of expertise at all. But
all you need to know is you got to eat protein to make protein.
You got to eat protein to make protein, yeah. And it can come from many sources. That's true. But, you know, kind of going back, and it was such a key point. You pulled a paper maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, because we consistently see, well, because we're reading DNA for a living, you know, that's what we do. We look at the patterns of how people are built. And people can struggle with managing oxidative stress, which is like mounting your own defense mechanism. Your body can do it beautifully. But some people are inefficient. So we see inefficiencies in these genes and we think, maybe we know what's going on. But almost always, the people who have the highest level of symptoms and difficulties have higher or poorer oxidative stress management, and they have this GSTM1 deletion. And it's like you said, we quote fix that, or we try to ease that by opening the faucet in stage 2 detoxification. That's where we're using sulforaphane to kind of open up that faucet so that when you have these high levels of oxidative stress, the body can deplete them, right? They've got to be able to go somewhere. So like you said, we use the melon extract to kind of put some, to ease to ease the equation, right? To ease this process. But then we have to open up the faucet so you don't end up hitting this brick wall in your liver or when you're trying to detoxify, which is what's happening. And that, as you said, and you were able to put it in the literature, that scenario shows up like an IgE reaction. It shows up with or without those histamine genes. It shows up all the time. And where I equate that, you and I were talking before we went live, because of my patient population, I almost always see that pattern with women who are struggling to lose weight midlife. Whether the menopausal pieces are at play or not, they have this accumulation of issues: postural, skeletal, musculoskeletal, joint. Why do I have arthritis? Why do I have dizziness, migraines, can't get out of bed? She's like almost fibromyalgia meets chronic fatigue, but it's not a diagnosis, meets poor recovery, meets weight loss resistance, and those genes are always there. It doesn't mean say it's the reason. It's the body's equation of saying, sort this out, because I'll do anything to tell you something's wrong, which is how I explain it. A migraine is it's a reflection that something's out of balance. And our job is to look into the biochemistry, like peek behind the curtains, right? And figure out where do we get in with our nutrigenomic incision tools to ease these equations, of which is what the body is listening to.
Yeah, and there's some fascinating connections too with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, IBS, and that mast cell activation too. I know the EDS and connective tissue disorders and mast cell histamine stuff runs rampant. We're seeing those connections all the time now, POTS as well. And so the post-orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, if you found yourself, post-viral and you're all of a sudden dizzy and you've got arrhythmias and stuff going on, I definitely have that in some of my long COVID and Lyme patients, that mast cell starts to take over, expresses as POTS, and, we're in a whole heap of trouble.
That's interesting because, again, we were chit-chatting about gene gems, things we're seeing in clinical practice, and it makes me go back, because you talked about long COVID, and I think of dizziness and orthostatic hypotension, and just maybe not even be able to focus, like dizziness. So I was saying to you that this connection, and this may fit in here, that I've came across is the ACE gene. So the ACE gene is associated with the angiotensin system. So the deletion, which we see a lot, it's pretty common to see it on a report, will rapidly activate the renin-angiotensin system. And that ACE enzyme can also cross the blood-brain barrier. And it has a neurotransmitter target as well, so it can really mess with neurotransmitters. But I'm thinking about it with exactly our long-term COVID patients. There's so many pieces of the puzzle, but that can also really rape the brain of dopamine. So really activate dopamine clearance. So when you clear dopamine really fast, it's really hard to focus too. So I'm thinking about that and making those connections. So I want you to go and look at we were looking at those genes before with a couple of other clients, but I wonder what that connection is. I know there's a huge tryptophan or kynurenic acid piece with long COVID, but this is making me wonder, because the ACE, what was the ACE2 receptor, right, is really what the target was with COVID, but would impact the same system. Yeah.
So the kidneys are heavily involved in some of that fluid balance, and obviously the heart rate and cardiovascular system, and the kidneys are running that system very tightly.
They are, and dopamine is converted to norepinephrine, epinephrine, which are fight or flight, hormones or targets, molecules. And what do? They will amp your heart rate. So it's interesting when you start to think through just a simple casual observation of genes and what they do, and then connect to some of what we're seeing with our patients. Genetics or genomics helps us look in these corners of our physiology that are less obvious, to make us think about what's the connection. Where do we work upstream to ease this inefficiency? That's not necessarily, I'm going to say in the medical literature, most of it is, but we start to see patterns over and over that that they're not necessarily reported. And then when we dig in it, kind of different annals of science, we're able to put together the connections. So anyway, I digress.
So, Amanda, what kinds of lab work would you order for your patients, and how clinically relevant are labs with histamine measurement tools?
We're going to, I'm going to measure, I am not going to measure histamine levels, nor am I going to put them on a low histamine diet. Actually, to answer that question, we need to talk to our colleague, Eileen Schutt. This is 100% her world. But I'm not going to look at labs to measure histamine. I'm going to look more at labs to measure oxidative stress. So uric acid, CRP. But I'm also going to look at whether somebody has the nutrient capability to metabolize histamine. So we're looking classically at homocysteine, B12, RBC, folate, magnesium, zinc, everything that we know will help the body produce SAMe so we can produce a methyl group. So it's interesting that the harder we work in this field, the simpler the labs are that we order, right? We don't need advanced labs necessarily. I might look at a CBC, right, too. Like, let's see what the composition of the immune system looks like, because that also tells us how we can push certain nutrients, or we're really working nutrigenomics to help do some of the rebalancing. So yeah, I'm looking more at what's the level of oxidative stress and what tools do I need to support to the stabilization, really, of the body.
And we look at the folate cycle again and again.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Like I feel like all roads lead to the folate cycle, the Krebs cycle, just
all roads. There's two major cycles. It's the folate methionine, like we call it the methylation cycle, but it's two major cycles. And then the Krebs cycle, because we're looking at the passage of biotransformation and nutrients so they can enter the electron transport chain. Can't enter the electron transport chain, you're pretty sick.
Yeah, and disruptors of those systems and those pathways are definitely heavy metal toxicity, mold toxicity, chronic infection, because those increase oxidative stress, because your body is just trying to sequester off things that don't belong. And, it's like, hey, let's take care of this. We'll heal and repair the body later. But right now we've got to keep mold under control. We've got to suppress the viral or bacterial load, or keep the heavy metals kind of tucked in a corner where they're not going to disrupt.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, they do.
I think the first system to go is going to be your reproductive system, because you shouldn't be making babies if your body's fighting something off actively. And I know that was true for me. So, even just infertility type stuff that's going on with men and women, it's like, well, what else is going on that you are using all of your nutritional resources to deal with oxidative stress? And those are usually my three. Is it infection? Is it mold? Is it heavy metals? Or
is it stress?
Or stress, all of the above. Yeah. So, those are similar markers. Low histamine diet, I wouldn't go to that either. Typically, maybe in a flare where it's kind of like,
maybe a flare. Yeah.
Leftovers. People might be more reactive to eating foods that are older. So trying to eat as fresh as possible, avoiding MSG. That is a huge one. Glutamate exacerbates histamine in a huge way. And the neurotransmitter panels I'm running on a number of clients, glutamate is off the charts. And glutamate's high, excitatory neurotransmitter. We've got anxiety and poor 100%. Sleep. Oof.
And guess what? To stabilize these very high levels of glutamate, there's a couple of genes, GADS1 and 2, it depends on the testing company. They are B6 and zinc dependent. Every neurotransmitter, including histamine, which is a neurotransmitter as well, signaling molecule peripherally, requires B6. It is a hog. You cannot make or metabolize dopamine, serotonin, or histamine, breaking it down without B6, and you cannot create GABA, so endogenously, without B6 and zinc. and where are they often most depleted? In the brain, right? And it's so interesting to see that. I think the B6 is the nutrient the most in demand in the body. You could say B12 and folate for methylation, but B6 is it's everywhere, and we can find it in food. It's not a problem. It's just I think we're deficient in it because of the demand on it. And I would say the more the stress, the higher the demand for vitamin B6, right? So no wonder these kids or your patients are depleted. What neurotransmitter panels are you running? Which
I use the Vibrant neurotransmitter panel most often, and what's so beautiful about that is that it's urine, and so even if you've got kiddos who are off the wall with ADHD or anxiety, you can run this and you can attempt to understand. And thankfully they have so for clinicians who aren't familiar with Vibrant, they do have an interpretive guide to help you understand. They show you these pathways that we're talking about.
Yeah, it's
they,
good
lay out if it's high, here's, nutrients that are necessary. If it's low, here's nutrients that are necessary for it. And then you can set up a clinical consult to have someone walk through it with you. So it's not like you have to go into this and go, I need to know everything. I can't help patients with this. It's like you can, and you just have to start. You got to start somewhere. So whether you have a beta testing price for, I'm looking for 10 clients that, are needing help in this area and I want some practice, charge less for that, and just try it out and try to understand those connections, because eventually you're going to pick up on it and then you're going to be able to make this.
You're fluent.
Yep.
And they actually will pair, we've done this, but it gets to be more expensive. You pair that with a micronutrient. You have a really good micronutrient test, which is blood, right? So then it's a lot. Yeah, it can be a lot. But if you're really trying to solve a complex case, those tests together are fantastic. Usually you got a pathway. I mean, a lot of times intuitively anyway, but sometimes, like I always say with parents, if we're dealing with a child, there is no guesswork involved at all. There's none. It's like we have to get it right, understand, and then work with kid gloves, with these children.
Otherwise, you could use an organic acids for kiddos too.
I would do that with
also
kids,
urine, and at least you get some indication of like B vitamin metabolism, or maybe even, fungal overgrowth. You could do a stool test. So you could do they have a 3 for $700 panel where you get 3 tests. So it could be organic acids, neurotransmitters, and stool. So that could be your pediatric package or something, but
exactly.
Help you save a little money when you buddy these tests up a little bit. So histamine. So Amanda, what are some foods or herbals you would consider, bioactives you would consider for dealing with histamine?
Well, dealing with, so, and it's such a loaded question, because the more we know, and what we've discussed this just in this session, the more we know that the root cause isn't histamine itself, it's something else. So we have to actually work upstream. But a lot of times I may use something like quercetin, but in a food form. So I'm very, very careful when we're using botanicals here, just because botanicals don't just target one molecule. So we can be using quercetin to target or downregulate like HNMT or something like that, but it also happens to slow down other genes, which can put somebody in a mental health crisis, as we found. So, I'm forever telling people, depending on what your gene picture looks like, using quercetin is not a really good idea, or green tea, which are good for you, is not a good idea. So I tend to, in these cases, go to food sources of something like quercetin, like capers or radishes. So increasing the natural influence of botanicals, if you will, within food itself. So it's at a physiological compatible level. But the bottom line is, that aside, if we're looking at somebody who's really asymptomatic because they have poor histamine degradation because of their gene scenario, I'm going to support methylation. I'm going to get up my methylation roadmap. We should just post that, which you know really well. And we created a map. And basically, that is your reach in. Like, remember when we were training, our reach in or walking in the kitchen, the commercial kitchen is where we grab the foods we need to make the meals that we're making for the menu. And so the methylation roadmap actually has all the foods you need, like mix and match them, that will help your body make the methyl molecule you need, at least for intracellular histamine metabolism. So we can use food.
Yeah, I love elderberry for that.
Elderberry as well.
I think
yes.
that's probably the easiest to
It
incorporate
is.
with kiddos in particular. Is you
I
can do an
agree.
elderberry syrup with a raw honey. So
Yeah, that's true.
so I make that at home, every winter, but you could use it in the spring when you got allergies too. I'll steep dried elderberries with some cinnamon sticks and cloves and ginger, like dried minced ginger. You could use fresh ginger and then let it cool completely. And then I'll add raw honey to it. And then I'll stick it in the fridge. So my kids love it because it's
the daily dose,
like mulled wine, and it's delicious. I enjoy it as well. So
well, it is like a mulled wine,
yeah.
It's
You got all those spices and everything.
Yeah.
So love elderberries for quercetin. My favorite roadmap that you have is the food as a gene whisperer, and it's just turning up the NRF2 antioxidant pathway, which has quercetin in that list. It's got sulforaphane in that list. Here's the foods you can find those in. Lycopene was on that list too. So that's one of my go-to roadmaps that I feel like is the most usable across the board with clients to help them understand that, you can use food for this. You can use watercress and arugula, and it's a delicious way to help your health.
Food pantry for your genes. And so what you're hearing us talk about is maybe it's less about targeting histamine and more about targeting the systems upstream that take your foot off the gas pedal, biochemically. So, and that's really what's happening is you're ending up with very high levels of basically bleach, right? H2O2. And depending on your gene picture, if the body doesn't know what to do with that, or you have a slowing in the next step, which we see a lot genetically, you're going to have a histamine-like reaction. It's going to show up something like that, which is what we see with those mast cell responses, and that you see a lot more than I do. It never ceases to amaze me. Like, there's three things that everyone seems to have, like people fitting in these categories: hypothyroidism, SIBO, or this mast cell activation. And it's showing up. And to me, they're just flashlights from the body saying there's something wrong. There's, and it is coming from the immune system, right? The immune system is definitely off or dysregulated. And those are calls, the calls for help. Like even with yourself, right, Sarah, like when you went through such a long health journey and you're still, I think, treating your thyroid, you're still tiny bit, but you've lowered the dose a lot. I think you've manipulated a lot the dose as you've optimized your thyroid.
I've been experimenting with T3 only recently because T4 can convert to reverse T3 under times of stress. And when you have your own business, good luck. Like it's.
Oh, you must have been dragging around then.
I was actually getting anxiety when I would take my thyroid med in the morning. So first thing in the morning on an empty stomach, and I would take it and I would feel worse. And so I'm like, well, that's not what we want. So I think some of that T4 is converting to reverse T3. So the break, and was causing a little bit more anxious response for that. So I've actually been experimenting with just T3, and this should be, overseen by your medical practitioner.
Yeah, do not do this by yourself
on your own. But it's been going okay so far. Antibodies have been stable. I could do a better job of being more consistent, taking it twice a day, which is harder for me.
It's hard.
Because it's supposed to be on an empty stomach when you take your thyroid medication. And so I do it first thing in the morning. It's on my nightstand, but then I'm supposed to take it in the afternoon, which, I'll probably take it when we're finished here. But being more consistent there, because, the more stress I've got coming in, the more my TSH is shifting around. So, but I've had good energy. So that's been helpful.
Good for you.
Yeah. So I would say in our flare, we've talked about our food, lifestyle wise, managing stress and, oxidative stress, not overdoing it on, the high intensity stuff, or listening to your body and taking recovery days seriously. Like those are part of your fitness routine, are also recovery days. But then aromatics, we talked about some of our herbals and botanicals. I know you've mentioned nettle as well as a great antihistamine. Do you have any other antihistamine nutrients and herbals?
It's funny. I don't think in that way. It's so interesting because I'm always thinking upstream. How do you get your foot off the gas versus how am I just going to directly target that? But no, I'm right with you. The elderberry, the nettle, would be where I would go. But I think the other big piece here is when you're having a flare, then you are flipping to the sympathetic nervous system. So how do you regulate that? And so just going back to the classic, like box breathing or whatever tools you're using to downregulate, to recenter yourself is, I think it's a more important part of the discussion than anything we're putting in our body. Like, how do you self-regulate? I mean, the science has never been clearer. That most of us many of us, as you started this whole conversation with, you're seeing these clients, and so am I, because of the environment we're in. None of us, at least in the United States, are looking at the island of Capri or sitting in our hotels on the Amalfi Coast, or on Santorini and watching the sunset. We're normally like stuck on a highway. Well, I'm not, but, on a highway in life, reacting to a very fast moving environment. And you can't take anything to stop that environment. You just can't. You actually have to sort of recenter yourself. And so the work on the vagus nerve. Take a sabbatical.
Sabbatical, so necessary. And I think that those high stress things contribute to glucose dysregulation and cortisol, which tumbles into histamine and uric acid. And then, now you've got gout and or prediabetes. And I've got patients like that. It's classic. And I'm like, we can fix that. Let's talk about your stress a little bit. And some of them are, just have enormous responsibilities where they're the oldest child of, 6 and they've got aging parents, or they're the youngest of 6 and they have everyone else's, wills. They're responsible for, their estate stuff should they pass, and they're watching their older siblings pass away. So it's just in the last week talking to someone who's the oldest and talking to someone who's the youngest, and they both have major stress because you're trying to be there for your family in the best way possible, and it impacts you in such a different way when you're the oldest and you're caring for your younger siblings, or you're the youngest and you're caring for your aging siblings. It's super fascinating, but if we are all on the same page and the same team and validating each other's experiences, it goes a long way into how we can manage stress a little bit better. And I'll say magnesium, big, in the replenishment department of our flare is a big one too. We're going to burn through magnesium in a huge way when we're stressed, as well as when we're performing as an athlete too.
Yeah. It's a good point, which would directly affect sleep too, because breaking down those very high stress, the demands on the dopamine cycle, depending on your genes, can leave you in an even more aggravated state. So magnesium, we'd use more magnesium glycinate of 3 and 8 there. If we're trying to do I'm trying to think of the word in English. It just came to me in French. The relaxation, what's soulager in English? It's to comfort. Like when we try to soulager, so when you're trying to comfort yourself, soothe. That's the word.
When your brain is talking in multiple
languages. Yeah, that one.
That is a gift I do not have. Oh my goodness. And just how are we going to spend our energy? And I say this to clients all the time, that, how you feel when you're eating is almost as important as what you're eating. Are you in a rest and digest state? Otherwise, we're pulling blood away from the GI tract into arms and legs, so we can run, whether it's a real, threat or a perceived threat, like a deadline or a public speaking engagement, your body is not ready to receive food. And so if you're rushed in your meals or, stressed that, hey, I had a reaction to this food before, and it could happen again if we come into a meal not in the right mindset, our body is going to react more in a histamine fashion.
Good point.
So I definitely coach on how you feel when you eat is almost as important as what you're eating.
Which
maybe
is
more
why
so.
we say grace, right? It's like you stop. It's not why, but it does stop you, like, and orient you to the environment that you're in.
Yeah, just trusting that, okay, maybe I did have a reaction last time, but I'm going to trust that my food is going to nourish me today, and allow it to, instead of putting the block up where you're like, you freeze up, you stress out, that, hey, these are not foods that do good things to me, but can we just take a moment and trust our food that it'll nourish us and allow it to?
I love that. I love that thought. Again, growing up in Europe, now the UK is very different, but just living in France and in Italy, that how important mealtime is. There are no phones on the table. Even when you're eating out, even when you're sitting in cafes, as you know, everyone is oriented to what they are doing there, right there and then, and not trying to take phone calls and doing a business deal in general somewhere else, or watching television or standing up and eating. It's just a very interesting thought, how important that time is to commune with others and your plate.
Yeah. Or loving yourself to eat lunch. So if you're listening to this podcast and lunch is coming up, or now it's 2:00 and you haven't eaten lunch, here is your reminder: love yourself enough to eat lunch.
There you go. And
cortisol spikes and histamine are on the way if you are skipping lunch. It's going to happen. So any other lasting thoughts on that, Amanda? On the histamine havoc?
I think one of the major take-homes is if you're someone who's getting caught in that do loop, take a look at the pace of life, the sheer demands on you, and that potentially the reactivity you're experiencing has got nothing to do with whether your histamine genes work or not. It has to maybe do with the pace of life and the demands on you, which then go back to, you can't eat your way out of that. You can eat so you can nourish. You just heard Sarah talk about that, but you can't eat your way out of taking stock of what's causing the stress in your life. That demands your focus, right? And the tools to kind of reestablish your energetics, to reorient them, however you do that. Whether it's meditation, prayer, singing, sleeping. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think increasing our stress resiliency by doing some of those things alongside, whether that's food or supplementation to improve methylation, I think we can increase our capacity to handle stress by figuring out, okay, is what I'm going through sustainable? If it's not sustainable, what action steps am I going to take to get myself out of it? Because if you wake up every morning dreading the day, you're setting yourself up for a histamine flare. So are the things that are causing stress, what steps can you take to make those changes to have something that's more sustainable? So increasing capacity while also reducing that stress load, asking for help, saying I'm overwhelmed. Can I get some help from my spouse, my friend, my, family member? Don't be afraid to ask for help and seek help with those things and just managing the day to day. Especially as a parent and, the wife, household manager extraordinaire. I know that is definitely my hat role, but just asking for help is a big one.
Absolutely.
Well, great. This was an awesome discussion on histamine. Hope our listeners today got some lovely nuggets of inspiration to help them in their own journey to managing histamine. And we'll see you next time.
Will do.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Beyond the Sequence. Follow on your favorite podcast app to be notified of new episodes. The information shared in Beyond the Sequence is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any medical conditions. Please consult your physician or healthcare provider for personalized medical advice, especially if you are taking prescription medications.